Welcome to the Jewish Education Experience podcast with your hosts, Yasmina and Ari, who will be uncovering gems of wisdom with Jewish educators from around the world.
To our audience, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support, and we appreciate you sharing our podcast with others also. Please consider supporting our podcast financially by contributing via Zelle, jewisheducationpodcast@gmail.com, or by joining our Patreon community, www.patreon.com/Jewish Education Experience Podcast. And to all of you Jewish educators and students of Jewish education around the world, chizchu ve'imtzu. May you be strengthened and encouraged in your holy endeavors. Please remember to hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast may not necessarily be those of the hosts.
Our guest today is Rabbi Erez Sherman, and he is a rabbi of Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, California, with his wife, Rabbi Nicole Guzik. He is an active educator and musician in both Sinai Temple Religious School and Sinai Akiba Academy. With his passion for sports, he created Sinai Temple Basketball Camp, Keen Special Needs Sports Clinic, and hosts the weekly podcast, Rabbi on the Sidelines, where sports and faith intersect. Hello, Rabbi Sherman. Welcome to our podcast, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's so good to connect virtually these days.
So do you ever go by Rabbi Erez or just Rabbi Sherman?
So I go by the Rabbi Sherman, and it's actually, I got that from my dad, who's also Rabbi Sherman. So the Shem Omro in the name of my dad. And my sister is Rabbi Marshall. So we've all been like the last name people. I don't know why. Just happened that way.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And then your wife is a rabbi too. That's pretty cool. And you guys
Also, yeah. So she has her own last name, Rabbi Guzik.
Wow.
So it's a family of rabbis, both horizontally, vertically, everywhere, which is
so interesting.
pretty neat.
That is pretty neat. Do you guys collaborate on things here and there too? Well, obviously your wife, you guys work together, but do you collaborate with your sister? And
Yeah, it's interesting. So now in the virtual world, we've been able to share resources in terms of the programs that I'm doing, then she does, and I see something in Cherry Hill at Bethel, and then I get to do that over here. In terms of collaboration with my dad, he also has a synagogue in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. And it's actually really nice. You know, you always say like, in the name of my father, or the name of my mother, you know, quoting the generations before. But it's always beautiful when I hear him also using the teachings of me or my wife or my sister. So it's become a family affair. But when we say collaborate, it's also interesting because I always tell our bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, if they couldn't show up for their bar and bat mitzvah and somebody else read their Devar Torah, it wouldn't sound good because it's not from their own heart.
right.
And I say the same thing. You know, my wife gives me a sermon, say, here, just read this. So it wouldn't be good because it's not from my own neshama, it's not from my own, heart and soul. So yes, collaboration and conversation, but I think the product always comes from inside each one of us.
So there's two of you. When there's a dispute, who wins?
Rabbi Opia wins because he's our. Actually, it's funny that you said that because when we came on to work together, first Rabbi Guzik, my wife, was working with Rabbi David Wolpe, and he said, I've never done this before. What if I choose one of you to give the sermon? And he said, no, we're not like that. So to be honest, we work together in a very large congregation and we don't really see each other besides the dinner table, which is wonderful because we do such different things, even within the realms of education, which I know we're also going to chat about too.
Right.
Definitely.
All right. Well, let's kick it off. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you began your journey in education?
Sure. So born in Syracuse, New York, upstate New York, in the 80s and 90s, the time when I grew up, if anybody's trying to figure out how old I am, it was a fairly large Jewish community, about 8,000 Jews. So for a city of that size, a decent, large Jewish community. Looking back at the people who were in that community, a lot of Holocaust survivors and their children. Nowadays, if you look in upstate New York and the Jewish demographic, a lot of people who are my age, so now mid to upper 30s, went to larger cities, if you wish, to find a more robust Jewish life sometimes. But looking back then, it was an amazing place to grow up. People really knew each other, and that's something that in a larger city, I feel like I don't get as much. If I don't show up, then somebody else will show up for me, and I try to teach that. In our Jewish day school, the Syracuse Hebrew Day School, where I went through 6th grade, that was where I got my foundations of what I do today. The Orthodox rabbi taught in the day school. That's where I learned to read Rashi script for the first time, read Mishnah for the first time. But also, it was at home as well. I'll give you a funny example where, the kids would dress up for Shabbat on Friday, and my mom would never dress me up. I said, everybody else is dressing up. She said, yes, but Shabbat begins when we light the candles. And I never understood that until now, because, in school you play Shabbat, but when it is Shabbat, you do Shabbat.
Right.
So I think that connection is really important for me when I teach as well, that you learn you learn in a classroom, but then where is your living laboratory? And for me, it was in the home and in the synagogue. And I've really taken that to heart in terms of what I do in my own role as well.
That's awesome.
Wow. All right. Well, you mentioned Rabbi David Wolpe.
Yep.
Are there any educators that you particularly admire?
Yeah, so I'm going to steal one from not the Jewish realm, but the musical realm, because I majored in music at Columbia University. And every single step of my rabbinic career, I'm not sure if I have followed music or music has followed me. But when my internship was in Temple Shalom in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the rabbi was looking for somebody who was comfortable with instruments being played on Shabbat, I was. And it would be a bonus if they could play an instrument, and I did. So I went there for my just a weekend, and the rabbi's like, "You're hired." I was like, "But I didn't even apply for anything." And he gave me wonderful advice. His name is Rabbi Mitch Hurwitz. He said, "I want you to think about not being a musical rabbi, but you being a rabbi who uses music within your educational realm." I thought that's really important. It's not like, oh, that rabbi plays the piano, let's hire him to sing Havdalah. But what does music bring to the table within a religious and educational context? I ended up writing my thesis undergrad at Columbia University in the Jewish Theological Seminary on that specific topic.
Wow.
Looking at halakha, looking at music within halakha and how that determined what congregations around the country. And I looked at also Orthodox congregations because I was very influenced by Congregation Ramat Orah on 110th Street on Broadway in the Upper West Side, fully a cappella music. I never wanted instruments to be a replacement for words that we did not know, but rather music to be an enhancement of tefillah. And the essence of that, thesis was simcha shel mitzvah, that how could a mitzvah be enhanced with joy? And I looked at different models. I now ended up at Sinai Temple, where the very popular and, if you wish, famous in Jewish music, Craig Taubman and Rabbi Wolpe started Friday Night Live for young professionals.
Wow, so cool.
We use music in many different ways. Ironically, right now, I run the traditional minyan at Sinai Temple called Family Minyan, where we don't use instruments because we also find it very important to have that space in our big tent as well. So right now, the musical rabbi doesn't use instruments, but for instance, 2 years ago, we followed some of the Orthodox congregations, and I brought in an a cappella group on my holidays, and people were like, what was that? I said, let's be open in terms of what does it mean to be musical? So I bring that to your attention because education, 2 musical mentors were both my classical music teacher, Steve Heyman in Syracuse University, but also my jazz teacher, my first jazz teacher, Dr. Howard Potter. And he always taught me about jazz. You always end up in the same place, but you take a different route to get there. Wow. I thought that was really important. I think it's the Jewish way. You never take the same route, and halakha means the path, the way to walk, and there's lots of different ways to get where we need to.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, we would love to read that thesis if you want to. It sounds really interesting.
It does sound
when you want to fall asleep quickly, I'm happy to send that to you. So I just want to give you one other example in the Jewish realm, though, because I wasn't just inspired musically, but at the seminary in New York, what I loved about JTS was you weren't just reading the books of the scholars, but you were having conversations with them. Mm-hmm. And I would say one of those people was Dr. Neil Gilman, Zichron Libracha, blessed memory, giant in the Jewish philosophy world. who taught me how to think about God. And I know that we're going to talk about God in a moment. And also somebody like Dr. Benjamin Gampel, who liturgy of medieval history. I could never think that would actually come to life, but he was able to like bring these people to life in that classroom and realize that we were part of that long chain of tradition.
That's really cool. I'm curious, which instruments do you play?
So piano is the only instrument that I know how to play.
Okay.
Ironically, my children are taking cello and violin downstairs at the moment. They also take piano, but theory is my thing. And just in the last year or so, I've gotten into composition, specifically Jewish composition, because I want to hear some new sounds coming from our ancient liturgy.
Wow. Yeah, we'd love to. Maybe we'll get to have you back for another one where we talk about that.
We love it.
All right. Well, so how do you talk about God, and how might that differ with the various age groups that you teach?
Yeah. So I'll go back to Dr. Gilman for that. He asked us in my sophomore year in college. I was in his class, sitting just miles away from Ground Zero in New York, and he said to us, "Where was God on 9/11?" And that was just days after 9/11. And how does a 19-year-old kid from upstate New York answer that? And then he asked us another question: where is God on the pediatric cancer ward? And these were answers that nobody has. But at the end of the semester, the final assignment was hand in your metaphor for God. So on one end, the artist the artist in the class drew a picture. On another end, musicians wrote songs. And me being a sports person, I had this interesting metaphor of God as a coach. And when you think about the sports world, the first person that does not get the credit when things go right is the coach. It's always the players. They're on the field, they're on the court, they're hitting the ball over the fence, they're putting the ball in the hoop. But when things don't go wrong, the players don't usually get fired. They might go to another team, but the coach is out in a second.
That's
right?
so true.
So the coach is on the hot seat, they say. And when you look at God in that way, I think it was a very interesting metaphor. And so when it's different, when you look at different age groups, that metaphor, I believe, fits everybody, because lots of people play sports, whether it's a 6-year-old in t-ball or it's an elderly person watching the NBA finals or World Series or whatever it is. But the question that often comes up for God, and I just had a bar mitzvah student a couple of weeks ago. He had his bar mitzvah, but for about a year, he didn't want to because he didn't believe in God. So the question and I don't remember where I heard this the first time, but the question I always ask people is, tell me about the God that you do not believe in. And they look at you strangely and they say, and I respond, that is also the God that I do not believe in.
Wow.
That doesn't mean that there are many gods, right? Adonai Echad, we have one God, but there are many different characteristics of God that I don't believe are present, or I believe that, I find God in, for instance, Rabbi Harold Kushner's philosophy, in the goodness of the world, and not in the plane striking the towers of 9/11, the goodness in the first responders. I mean, look at this past year with COVID, right? In our own congregation, made a beautiful video of all the first responders. Yeah, that's God's goodness. God's goodness is not in the virus that has taken over 500,000 people in this country,
right?
But God's goodness is in the scientists. So that idea of where goodness is in God, I think, is a question that people have of all ages. And I think it's bringing that question, not that answer, but bringing that question to where people are. So if it's a religious school classroom or Zoom room, it's asking them how their week was and finding moments where they felt God. In the adult population, it's a little deeper in terms of, looking at different texts of the 13 attributes of God, or like, how can God be an Adonai Ish Milchama, a person of war, but also at the end say, Oseh Shalom B'Mamav, God who brings peace unto heavens. How can you be both? And I think there, I always give the analogy of a human being. I'm a brother, I'm a father, I'm a rabbi, I'm a teacher, I'm a son. And even though I'm the same person wearing the same clothes, I'm a different characteristic in each of those situations. Right. And I think if we can look at God in that way, like when I look at the And it's really hard on Zoom right now or on YouTube. Like our Shabbat services are on YouTube, and all you see is a number, 235 viewers. But when you're in the Beit Knesset and I can see, I realize the person to my left is in mourning at Shiva. The person on my right is having an offer for an upcoming wedding. The person in the back is having a yard site. And they're all there for different reasons, but in the same room. That tells me a moment where God brings people together for all different things.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's powerful.
How are you guys doing with COVID in your community?
Yeah, so this past week was Parshat Vayakel. There's a reason why Moshe says Vayakel, to gather, because we like to do that as Jews. And I don't think we just like to, I think we need to.
We need to, yeah.
When this all started a year ago, we canceled B'nai Mitzvah for 3 weeks. And then we realized we're very blessed with over 100 B'nai Mitzvah a year. That if we cancel them for a year, we're going to have 200 B'nai Mitzvah, and that's just not possible. So we brought them back in all different ways and forms. And thankfully now we have archival footage on video. And there's a beautiful story of a bar mitzvah that was right after Sukkot. And the mother emailed me and said, can I get the dimensions of the shulchan, of the table in the chapel? So why do you want that? And she said, because I want to build my own for my child. And then I want this table to go from house to house each week for the B'nai Mitzvah. And they're going to sign their name. And when this is all over, all the people who shared that shulchan in their own homes are going to come together for a party.
Wow, I really like that idea.
Yeah, it's been amazing. So first we started delivering Torah. We're like a Uber. It's like Postmates Torah every Thursday. We take the Torahs to the different homes. But now we don't just take Torahs. We then started giving the tables out. And then we started giving portable Aron Kodeshes out. And now their home literally became a Mikdash Ma'at. Nice. So it's been a way to connect in ways that we never thought. And I think the question now is, which traditions did we start that should not go away when we come back?
Yep, right.
Totally.
Yeah, that's like a genius, I think, like pedagogical technique there.
Definitely.
So speaking about education, chinuch can be an amorphous term. How do you define education?
So I'm going to go to Hanukkah for this answer, because the word chinuch is found in Hanukkah, and Hanukkah is rededication. And I think education is rededication to knowledge. When I have the opportunity to teach 4th and 5th grade trope in our day school, Sinai Kiva Academy, which is attached to our Synagogue of Sinai Temple. And we do, it's called Chironomy, which are the hand motions to the tropes. And I look at the 4th graders and they've never seen trope before. And it's a strange experience for them. But when I come back in 5th grade, they know this stuff like it's second nature. And first they're like, oh, I just have to memorize this stuff. I say, no memorization, only education. If we're just memorizing, like, the old school way we used to prepare for our B'nai Mitzvah, here's a tape, learn it, but you weren't learning it. You were just memorizing it in one ear and out the other.
For sure.
Education is something that you rededicate yourself to every day. And I think, like I said earlier, it's also making it relevant. And I don't mean relevant in a dumbed down, simple way, right? Something can be relevant and also deep at the same moment. I think that's what we've really found over this pandemic. What topics are we choosing to speak about? How do we use technology and other tools that have never been used before? We've had scholars that we've never been able to have because of time zone differences that, based on the click of a button, we've been able to rededicate ourselves to knowledge. And with that, I take the phrase from before the Shema, Lil Mod Lil Amed. For me, education is not only teaching facts and materials, but it's also learning more from, I don't want to say the audience, but learning as much from our class as we are from the teacher as well.
Yeah, that's really important, that we really can learn from everyone. Can you say the name of what it's called with the hand motions again for trope?
Yeah, Chironomy. It's a musical term.
That sounds awesome.
Where does one learn that?
So I learned mine from Cantor Ariane Brown. I'll give her a shout out. She used to be at Sinai Temple. Now she's at Israel in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
You can, in fact, she has YouTube videos of that as well. But it's like, like the Gabbai on Shabbat, and they'll often do that as well. But it's fun for the kids. We do like Chironomy, charades, and learning trope.
That's
And
so cool.
it's neat because, this is fourth grade and they're getting to their B'nai Mitzvah 3 years later. And I love when I stand next to them now that I've been doing this long enough in this same location. I say, like, do you remember when? And they're like, oh yeah, I totally get it now. And when those light bulbs go off, that's when I realize that education's working.
It's true. And it creates that little seed. You plant that seed that they're in fourth grade, and then they might not remember it right away, but then when they're at that age, bar mitzvah age, and they're like, oh yeah, it's that's just really cool. A way to hold on to it.
Yeah, and we've been before we started doing trope in the school, right? It was just the classroom. Now that class is attached to an experience. So that class comes for Shabbat. They teach their parents Chironomy. They read a pasuk of Torah. So it's a living laboratory that I call it.
Right. Yeah, I feel like it's a great combination. For someone who, let's say they're having a bar bat mitzvah and they have, what do you call them, a chironomer?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And you get the chironomer there, and it's like just a whole different experience. So
exactly.
Wow.
I'm also curious, how did you come up with, or how did you tie together the Judaism with the sports stuff? Because
Yes.
Your podcast that you have, how did you do that? How did you start that? Very curious.
Yeah, so I'm absolutely passionate about sports. I'll watch any sporting event, whether it's table tennis, skee ball, or the Final Four, or whatever it is. I find value in sports, whether it's the competition, the teamwork, the camaraderie, all those values that you find in sports. When I got to Sinai Temple, like I said, we're blessed with a beautiful building. Not so much outdoor space, but we have 3 gyms. And when I got to Sinai, there was empty gyms during the summer, but I knew all these kids were playing basketball in recreational leagues. Uh-huh. So I said, okay, if I can bring them here with the same level or even better level of sports, and then attach those Jewish values to that, I think I can do something. So I found the coach that I knew I could believe in. His name is Coach Jay, Jelani Bendel. Was not Jewish, and he's been amazing, and he loves Shabbat dinners now. It's just awesome. And then I grew up in basketball camps, but I grew up going to camps like Christian Brothers Academy, Bishop Grimes, right? The rabbi's son was going all to these Christian camps. It was strictly basketball, but they happened to be in Christian schools. Uh-huh. And I did it the other way around. And what I got was an amazing product. Every day has a speaker, and these people from the NBA, people from the sports world, people who had inspirational messages. And then I got great competition. And instead of an award ceremony, there's a Shabbat dinner at my house in the driveway. Cool. Every single day, there's a social action component. So whether it's a homeless drive or Keen, as you mentioned before, that's kids enjoying exercise now. I'm a local board member of Keen. It's a national organization. And these are mostly low-income kids coming from downtown LA, simply looking to play some sports. Their parents get an hour of respite time. Now we provide resources for them, so a healthy lunch, translated into Spanish resources about education in the public schools, and I call it beyond basketball. It's gone much beyond the actual game. And now kids are doing B'nai Mitzvah, I don't call them projects, but mitzvah experiences with Keen. So Keen wasn't happening at Sinai at the shul during COVID, but those kids still needed to eat. So one kid provided, for instance, Christmas meals for all these families. So it started with the ball. It's now gone well beyond the ball. And the podcast came out of the relationships that I've been very fortunate to form with people who have made really significant differences in sports. And I ask them the same question every week. I say, do faith and sports intersect? Mm-hmm. And these are broadcasters on ESPN and CBS and players and coaches. And every single one of them said yes in some very unique, different form. And I think it's fascinating because what I'm able to do is bring out the stories behind the athletes, which they wouldn't really share on the court, but it's within them.
That really is fascinating.
Yeah. First thing that comes to mind with me with sports is just like the battle, like life is a battle. There's so many, so challenging. What's the biggest challenge that you faced as an educator?
Yeah. I think entry level, and actually 2 words that I use because part of my hat as a rabbi at Sinai Temple is membership. Transactional versus relational, right? People show up at a school, at a synagogue. How much does it cost for a bar mitzvah? How much does it cost for a wedding? How much does it cost for a funeral? And we need to change that model to relational. It's not how, and a lot of other Jewish organizations, I'm very involved with APAC, right? The U.S.-Israel relationship. And I don't think most people go to APAC and say, how much does the U.S.-Israel relationship cost? Mm-hmm. And if the U.S.-Israel relationship is down this year, then I'm not going to be a member. That's not the way it works. Or the ADL, right? Anti-Defamation League, fighting anti-Semitism. If the numbers of anti-Semitism are up this year, then I'm not going to join. No, you join because of the cause, the communal that you believe in. So that's been the biggest challenge. I think we've seen another rabbi told me over this COVID time period, disruption is a time for disruption. I think that's true for the case of education as well. We're just coming back in person over the last 2 weeks, and families are saying, for the same families who said, I didn't want to do Zoom religious school, now they're like, I love this. I don't have to fight the traffic. I can make my own coffee in the morning. So that balance, but disruption is a time for disruption. I think we're at that moment in a very exciting way. So yes, which content has to be delivered in terms of facts? Aleph is Aleph, Bet is Bet. But I was just talking to a different educator and they say, you know what? We need more retreats because retreats build relationships and relationships build community. The facts, yeah, maybe we can learn Hebrew online, but we come together to do the communal piece. So I think the relational piece is the challenge, but also the blessing that I feel like it's gonna burst soon in a really beautiful way.
Right. So do you think like the dues model? I guess that's what I think of the dues model of synagogues. Should that be changed? Is there a better way to do that?
So I don't want to go on the record here. Is there a better way?
Don't worry, we'll edit it out later.
No. I think we'll go Torah on this one. Kol nadiv libo, right? Give according to your heart's desire. When do you give according to your heart's desire? When you have a sacred relationship, but it's a chicken and the egg question. How do you begin the sacred relationship? So we're blessed that we have a very full preschool. We have an amazing parenting center that parents they can't get in the door fast enough. That's amazing. So does the model have to change? Probably yes, but it's a relational model that I think can change. So we need both. We need all. We need all to be involved in this, which Rabbi Wolpe often says, the experiment of Judaism.
Right. Okay. You didn't say anything confidential there, right?
Nope. All good.
Okay. That's a great answer.
So how do you stay motivated with the challenges that you face, the challenges you continue to face, and being a rabbi, one of the rabbis at the synagogue, the shul and everything? How do you stay motivated to continue?
Yeah, no, I think it starts with foundations, and then it might look different every year. I also want to bring up one really important point with education, that's special needs education. My wife created Beit Bracha, House of Blessing, which is our special needs education. Her parents were special needs educators in the public school system in Laguna Hills. And on my side, I had a brother, Eyal of blessed memory, who was a quadriplegic for 32 of his 36 years.
Wow.
Even in my dad's own synagogue, he didn't go to religious school because we didn't have the resources to understand how to have those resources. So that's why it goes back to my first answer earlier in this podcast, which is the home is where it's taught, because that's where it was taught. So I like to say I look at the world in curb cuts, meaning I see places where things are not accessible and I try to make a curb cut for them to be accessible. And through our Beit Bracha program, these stories, families who were said, there's no way, like Jewish education, my kid can't even read English left to right. How are they going to read Hebrew right to left? And we find those moments for them. And what's some of the most meaningful B'nai Mitzvah are those Beit Bracha families. It's not in a separate service, it's in the main service. Nobody's segregated, they're integrated. It's an amazing, amazing program that we at Sinai Temple, I'm proud of the program that my wife has created. It's become a very special thing in the Los Angeles community.
Yeah, that's really cool. Is it something that other synagogues in the area have also incorporated?
Yes, there's lots of different ones. Some of those students also go to Camp Ramah, the Amitzim program, which is the
Okay.
special needs program. And this is a really neat thing that happened the last few years. There's the Ezra program, which is vocational learning at Camp Ramah in Ojai, California. And they started a thing called Ezra Ba'ir, which is those kids during the year paired up with Jewish organizations. So I have one young man, Zachary Cohen, shout out to Zach, who works with us 3 days a week and in the office. And I remember him coming in the first day with his like shoulder slouched, he didn't know what to do. And then he came to like a Sukkot party at our backyard, I think like before COVID. And his dad came too. And his dad was like, does he know these people? I was like, we all know Zach. And it was an amazing moment how the community has embraced not just Zach, but how that Ezra Ba'ir has also embraced us. So it goes back to your question, the motivation. It's not just like doing something new and putting something to the side. It's really looking at the community and what the needs are. Needs change, obviously, but sticking to your mission. And I think that mission is education, and not just the facts, but education in terms of who we are as a community and as a people.
Right.
How do you think we could do a better job at including people with special needs?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say B'Tselem Elohim, an image of God, but it's much harder to do.
Right.
So it's finding, some people say also like, oh, there's no people like this in my community. Well, that's often the case, not because there are no people like this or that, but because they don't feel welcome in this or that community. So like, oh, we don't have that problem. They're not here. No, think about it the other way. Why aren't those people walking in the door? Because they don't feel welcome. So that I think is a start. Look, there's lots of different challenges to address, but I keep going back to relationships. When you have a relationship with the person, with the family, with the clergy member, with the teacher, it starts there, and those people become a model. And I think it's really important. Like a kid like Zach Cohen, right? When he comes in with me to the preschool kids now know that that's somebody with special needs. If a 2-year-old doesn't grow up, doesn't have a special needs member in their family or their social circle, how are they going to know any differently?
Yeah.
So I think it's the exposure, and not the exposure of like, oh, put this person on stage, but real exposure of who this person is and who we are. That's, I think, how we do a better job.
Right. Yeah. And thank God there's, people like you out there. I mean, you seem pretty motivated yourself. And I think it ties in also with your definition of education, the constant rededication, renewal, all that. So, thanks to you and people like you who are doing that.
Well, it's a passion. Thank you.
So what advice would you give to new educators who are just beginning their journeys in the field?
Yeah, I think back to rabbinical school now 12 years ago, right? Like, what would they have taught me? And I mean, the technology, go for it. Absolutely go for it and learn it. We all learned Zoom in 2 seconds, but I was afraid to do a breakout room till 2 weeks ago. So that scared me, but my 9-year-old daughter helps me and sets it up. So like,
wow, isn't that amazing?
It's more than amazing. She made these iPhone moves. I'm like, how did you make that? She's like, I just do it. So be open to the new while not giving up on the values that you want to teach. And even though new is different and definitely scary, and there obviously will be pushback, new can also be exciting, right? You always want to make the new idea somebody else's idea, and then have somebody else say, oh, we should do this, and say, I told you so, right? So yeah, the words of Breshit bara Elohim, those will never change. But the way we teach them, it should change in a beautiful way. I think we really saw that over this past year. So my advice would be open to innovation, but keep the foundation. So new innovation, same foundation. How's that?
I like it.
Very nice.
I like it. How do you think we can help build a proper Torah foundation to make sure that we continue having Jews and having kids continue to want to be Jewish?
I almost feel like we need to rephrase this one, because it's like, in some sense, the foundation's already built when the child's much younger, right? Like for all of us. But maybe if you're, innovating on top of the foundation, maybe the foundation, does it ever need work?
Yeah, tomorrow I'm starting my second year of teaching the Introduction to Judaism class for the American Jewish University. If you ever step into those classes, wow, those people, they're adults, right? Who don't know so much about Judaism. They're either rediscovering what they didn't have as a child, they're becoming Jews by choice. And when you see the drive for education from these people, it's unbelievable. So it reminds me of Rabbi Akiva, who of course started learning at age 40 and became one of the greatest sages of our not of our time, but of our history. Right. It can start at any year, and you never know when the spark is gonna happen. So it can happen, and you walk into a kindergarten classroom. Like, I already have 3 kindergartners who I would love to peg for rabbinical school, right? You want to already get them going, but I also want every one of those people to be a valued member in the community, in the congregation, and have that proper Torah foundation. So I think it's building the proper foundation is, let's go back to Hanukkah, is lighting the first candle so that more can burn the next night.
Right. It's just actually a really interesting analogy, I think, because would you say that Rabbi Akiva built upon the same foundation, or did he knock down what was there and build something new?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the temple, right? Like, it was brought down to its foundation, I think.
Exactly. I mean, Yavne and like, it would have been all over, but there was a group of people that said, it's not over. Let's continue to do this. And let's go back 1 year ago, right? It could have been over. What was the doomsday scenario? And yes, granted, some synagogues closed and merged and things like that, but there was a lot of people out there that said, we can do this. We can do this. I've seen it with weddings. I've seen it with funerals. I've seen it with B'nai Mitzvah. I've seen it with all life cycle events. We've all seen it this year, that we can do this. And now, like you just said, I think it's both what you said, right? It's taking the foundation that we had and then building it. My grandfather, who passed away over 10 years ago, would not know this Judaism that we saw just 12 years later. And I pray that my grandchildren will, this goes to the Rabbi Akiva Moshe story, right? When Moses is sitting in the back of the classroom, was like, what's this guy teaching? Until he says, I learned this from Moses at Sinai, did he realize, the foundation was there, but the innovation is what I'm seeing.
Wow, I like it.
Yeah, these are great answers, giving us a lot to think about. We may need to rephrase that question going forward, because you're giving us a new perspective here.
Yeah.
What does successful Jewish education look like, do you think?
Yeah, I feel
in
like
the future?
Yeah, I mean, this is I can only imagine what you're envisioning.
Yeah,
I guess I can't actually.
So I think it's in the classroom, it's on the court, it's in the home, it's at the beach, it's in the forest, it's on the bus, it's everywhere. It's an all-encompassing aspect. I'm blessed to be 3 miles from Santa Monica, so we can do a Shabbat at the beach, and we can do a Shabbat on the roof in January and have it be 80 degrees.
Oh my gosh, you're jealous.
But it rained today. It's crazy. Oh my gosh. But I think that all encompassing. Yeah, I like to say this, that you don't check. It's a Judaism where you don't check your kippah at the door. And like shul where there's the kippah bin, which, this might be a good analogy post-COVID, right? Everybody, or we at least, have gotten rid of the kippah bin. It's now bring your own, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's a good analogy for Judaism too. Because what happens, you put your kippah in the bin, you leave, and outside on the street, you're just whoever you are, American, whatever. But when you come in, all of a sudden you're Jewish, right? I think Jewish education, Jewish community going forward is all encompassing. When you're on the street, do you think like a Jew, right? Not in a good way or a bad way, but do you have that sense of Judaism when you're walking down the street? Or do you, do the good values when you're in the sanctuary? But I'll give you one last example. Many years ago, somebody told me that their friend wraps tefillin every morning. I said, that's very, very good. I said, do you know why he wraps tefillin? It's probably because it's the right thing to do. It's a mitzvah. No. He wraps tefillin to protect him against the bad business deals that he'll do all day long.
Wow. Wow.
So that was not the right model.
Right.
The right model is wrap the tefillin. I call when somebody takes off the tefillin, I call it the God hug. When the print, the things that you see on your arms, take that God hug with you. So when you look down at your arm, you make the right choices and not the wrong ones.
For sure.
So yes, all encompassing Judaism is for me the education of the future that's experiential but deep.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, let's see how things go. I can only imagine how much things are going to change in the next bit.
Yes, hopefully for the good.
I hope so too, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, Rabbi Sherman, you've given us a lot to think about. We hope our listeners are really going to like this too. And if they have any questions, they can, track you down. And
please. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse. If you're not on Clubhouse, definitely join. We're going to get a presence there. And when you talk about Jewish education, I honestly think that's the next social media that's going to be really important.
That would be,
wow.
That's really cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're definitely going to have to check back in with you.
And thank you for joining us and for giving us your wisdom, your tips, and taking the time to talk with us tonight. I know you have kids and busy, so we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We're going to have to get you back for that composition podcast.
Yes, I'm yours.
That would be really cool.